You're being controlled right now by something you can't see. And that's not a bug, actually. That is the entire point of the system. Everyone in this space asks the same questions over and over. What is the phenomenon? Where does it come from? Why is it here? And why the hell can't we see it, much less understand it? For 50 years, Jacques Vallée called it a control system. Not spaceships, not hoaxes. He's argued it's something regulating human consciousness from a level we have no power to touch. And most people wrote him off. But I think he was onto something huge. He just looked at it from maybe the wrong end. Because I came to the same conclusion, but from the opposite direction. Through biology, through scaling laws, and through the way intelligence and control emerge at every level of life. By the end of this video, I hope to show you that the answers to those 4 questions, I believe, are all connected. That the phenomenon may be the visible leakage of a higher level control system, just as Jacques Vallée said. And I also argue that it has to stay invisible. This is why we can't see it, and that's by evolutionary design. It's a hypothesis, so I'll show you my work and you can decide what you think. But I don't think you'll see the phenomenon the same way again. Welcome to the channel. Thanks for being here. I'm Chris Lehto, former F-16 pilot turned UAP investigator. So let's start with Vallée actually said, because this seems to get butchered constantly. It's not that clear cut, right? Vallée framed it like a thermostat. And I think that's the key to everything. A thermostat stabilizes the relationship between your comfort and the weather outside. The thermostat doesn't care about you, right? It cares only about that relationship. It doesn't even know about you, actually. So I believe Vallée proposed that the phenomenon stabilizes the relationship between human consciousness and the growing complexity of the world that we have to survive in. So this is the main point. According to Vallée, the phenomenon isn't here to visit us, right? In his framing, it's here to regulate us, to keep something in range, some relationship. And if you notice, most of the field couldn't use this, right? So the believers wanted ships from another star. The skeptics wanted swamp gas. Vallée handed both of them something they couldn't use, right? Something totally off. Vallée was careful. When he spoke of a control system for Earth, he did not mean some higher order of beings had locked us in a cosmic jail, or that we are watched by angels or demons. So he wasn't redefining God. He meant that something operates at a level of our reality that ordinary politics and ordinary thinking really just have no power over, no control over. And so here's the part that everybody skips. Vallée deliberately refused to name the source. So he said it might be unknowable at this stage of human development. So he noticed the behavior, right? The waves of sightings, the absurdity, the way the phenomenon seems to teach us through something like a reinforcement schedule, straight out of like behavioral psychology. And then he just stopped. He stopped right there on purpose. So really he described a fingerprint, right? Like a symptom. And he refused to guess at the hand, at what it actually was. And for 50 years, people have treated that refusal as humility. But I've started to think that it was a gap. So I think it's a missing piece that he just didn't have the tools to fill. This is the same way doctors, for 2,000 years, literally, could watch people die of an invisible cause, and they just had no way to name it. Our society, our civilization, technologically, perceptually, just wasn't ready. And I really think the analogy is just perfect, because that exact situation where you have a real effect with no nameable cause has happened before in history. And the resolution was one of the most important discoveries that we ever made. For most of human history, disease was a mystery with no mechanism. It was supernatural. So people died in waves, right? Whole cities emptied. And the smartest people alive, the best minds ever, explained it away with Bad air, they said it was divine punishment, right? That's why we say God bless you when you sneeze. They said it was an imbalance of humors. Even when the first reports came in of tiny living creatures swimming in a drop of water, the Royal Society in London didn't celebrate this amazing discovery. They dismissed it. So why did they dismiss it for almost 200 years? It's not because they were stupid, right? These were brilliant people. These were the smartest humans we have. I think the problem was deeper than intelligence. We have a built-in assumption that what we cannot see does not exist. And we really struggle to recognize life operating at other scales, different from our own. I mean, the microbes were there literally the entire time in every breath of air, right? Every wound, every drop of water, the deaths were preventable the entire time. The only thing missing for 2,000 years was the willingness and the tools to see a scale that we weren't able to perceive. We weren't able to perceive it because we weren't built to perceive it. In the past, what we had, very similar to today, is we had a real effect, right? We had observable effects. They were deadly, right? It was patterned. There were symptoms of microscopic life. But the cause stayed invisible. And it's not because it was hiding on purpose, right? Microscopic life wasn't literally hiding on purpose. It's because it lived at a scale that our perception simply doesn't reach. Evolutionarily, we just were blind to it. Vallée's phenomenon has that exact same shape, right? You have a real effect. It's patterned. We have decades of data. And we have a cause he could describe to the behavior of, but never locate where it actually came from. So what I'm asking is, what if it's invisible for the same reason that the microbes were? Not because it's supernatural. Much of the phenomenon we attribute to supernatural causes. What if it's because it's operating at a scale that we're not built to see? And this is where it gets interesting, because the scale I'm talking about isn't necessarily smaller than us, although it could be. I think it's larger. So let's get back to the control system. Okay, let me show you control from above happening in a lab, because it's easier to look from above, right? So this isn't like mysticism. This is just biology. So there's a flatworm called a planarian, right? If you cut it in half, each half will grow back into a whole worm. This is a famous trick. It's essentially immortal. But a biologist named Michael Levin at Tufts University went looking for what actually tells the cells what to build. How do they know to stop when they build the whole worm? And what he found is it's not just the DNA. So every cell in your body holds a tiny voltage across its membrane. So that is a real measurable electrical field. And those fields form a kind of blueprint. So that's a pattern that sits above the individual cells and tells them what to become. Levin's team changed that electrical pattern. So he didn't touch a single gene, right? He didn't touch the DNA. And he was able to grow worms now with 2 heads. So the DNA was identical. He didn't change it. So the genome said 1 head, but the electrical field said 2. And the cells obeyed the field. And then when those 2-headed worms reproduced now, their offspring also had 2 heads. So think about that. It wasn't the DNA. He changed the electrical pattern from above, right? He was from a higher level, changing this lower level organism. So the pattern at the higher level overrode the instructions at the lower level. The cells never knew. No individual planarian cell decided to build a 2-headed worm. They just followed their normal signal coming from a level of organization above them that they could not perceive and did not understand. So that's not a metaphor for control. It's not a metaphor for a control system, right? That is control, and it is completely natural. So now zoom out. And this is the part that got me, why I wrote our Fractal Universe, the whole framework, is this same shape shows up at every level we can actually look at. So your neurons don't know they're thinking. the actual thought, the emergent property of what you call a thought, lives at least one level above them. Ants don't know they're building a colony with logic. No single ant holds the plan or the pattern for the colony. Individual traders on the stock market don't know they're creating an entire market. We know from the emergent properties now because we can see the big picture. But each trader is just doing their own trading. So the intelligence, the coordination, the control, it always lives one level or more above the parts doing the work. Constraint comes from above. The coherence shows up below, over and over. That's at every scale that we've ever managed to see. So here's the question that motivated me to write the book and broke my brain, essentially, is if that pattern is reliable, if there is always a level of organization above the components, steering them invisibly, what is the level above us? So now the obvious objection, right? If there's a system above us controlling us, why can't we see it? And I think the answer is the most important idea in this whole video. I argue it has to be invisible by design because of evolution. A cognitive computer scientist named Donald Hoffman has spent decades running evolutionary simulations. So he's been asking one simple question: does seeing reality accurately help an organism survive? Does seeing the underlying truth actually help you? Will the truth set you free? And the answer his simulations keep returning at 100% is no. Not even a little. Not once, actually. Not in one simulation did seeing the underlying reality help evolutionary fitness. So organisms that perceive reality usefully, just enough to eat, mate, and not die, beat organisms that perceive reality truthfully every single time. So truth is expensive. Survival doesn't pay for the truth. So think about what that means. So the very process that built your eyes and your brain, evolution, has no use for showing you the larger system you're a part of. There is no benefit. Seeing it wouldn't help you survive. So you don't see it. You literally can't see it. So now connect the two ideas, right? Because they're the whole argument. A control system, one level above you, would be invisible. Not as a side effect, but as a requirement. I mean, think about it. If the components could see the system controlling them, they could resist it. Think what cancer is. Cancer's still living. It's a living entity, but it's after its own goals. It's no longer aligned with you as an organism. And what happens? A system that can be seen by its parts as a system, as a control system, can then be fought. Cancer cells have their own alignment, different from yours. So any control system that actually works at any scale has to be imperceptible to the things it controls. The microbes were invisible by accident. We just didn't have microscopes. But a control system above us would be invisible on purpose. What I mean by on purpose, through evolutionary processes. Because that's the only kind of control system that survives. Your liver cells will never perceive you. They can't. If they could model the whole body and start making decisions for it, you would be dead. You would just be a giant liver, right? The body works precisely because the cells can't see the level above them. So when we ask, why can't we see the thing controlling us? We're asking the wrong question. Of course we can't see it. We're the liver cells. Not seeing it is exactly what we should expect. And this answers something that drives people crazy about the phenomenon, including me. People assume the government must know that somewhere there's this big file, there's a hangar, there's like this committee that has it all figured out and is keeping this information from us. And I'm sure there are secrets. There definitely are. We've gotten enough evidence, enough information, enough whistleblowers. But if you step back and you look at the structure, your government isn't about you in this hierarchy. It's made of you. It's another layer of cells, bigger cells, organized differently. but it's still components inside the same body. A nation is just a higher order organism built out of humans, the way you're built out of cells. This is my hypothesis. And so here's the trap. A control system only works if the system being controlled can't see it. That doesn't stop at the level of individual people. It has to hold all the way up. Why would it stop at the nation? If a government could clearly perceive that it was being steered through its own institutions, its agencies, its incentives, all its myths, then the relationship breaks, the control fails. So the same evolutionary logic that blinds you also blinds the institution. The nation can't see the level above the nation for exactly the same reason the cell can't see the body. So this means there is probably no one in the room who actually knows. So that is not a cover-up per se. That is the design. It's the design of a control system. I want to flip this, okay? Because if you've been getting like this creepy, sinister feeling for the last few minutes, like we're trapped, I hear this a lot, like we're on a prison planet, like we're cattle, I actually think that feeling is wrong, or it's at least incomplete. Because this relationship runs both ways. Your cells don't suffer under your control. They thrive under it. Your cells would not be around if it were not for you, and you would not be around if it weren't for your cells. So a cell inside a healthy body has its temperature regulated. It gets free energy, right? Its waste is hauled away. Its enemies are fought off by this immune system. It will never comprehend. It lives longer. It does more. And that's because it surrendered the job of running the whole show to a level above it, right? The cells that won't surrender, the ones that didn't, the ones that break rank and start acting for themselves, like I said, we have a name for those. We call them cancer. And yes, they live on their own. They live free, but they also kill the body and themselves along with it. So here's the uncomfortable and also beautiful possibility. The ignorance isn't a cage. I think it might actually be the deal. You've heard the saying, ignorance is bliss. And it may actually be a requirement for long-term fitness. The cell is more successful because it doesn't carry the unbearable weight of actually perceiving the whole, of seeing the truth, seeing reality. It just gets to be a cell, right? Ignorance is bliss. In exchange, it gets stability and a longevity it could never achieve alone. It wouldn't actually even exist if it weren't for the deal. So what if that's us? What if not seeing the level above us isn't a prison? It's the same bargain every successful component in nature has always made. You give up the God's eye view. In return, you get to be, right? You get to function. You get to be carried by something larger and more durable than yourself. You get meaning. So you could look at that as a prison, or you could also look at it as a thermostat, right? So that's not a thermostat like clamping down on us. That's a partnership that we can't perceive. It's running on both ends of a wire we didn't even know was there. So now come back to Jacques Vallée. Vallée started with the data, 50 years of sightings, waves and patterns, crazy, absurd encounters that seem literally designed to bypass our reason and hit us at this level of myth. So he looked at all of it and reasoned upward, backward from the evidence, as you would as a scientist, to a conclusion. And he found that something is regulating us. There's a control system. And then, honest scientist that he is, he stopped because he had no mechanism to explain what could possibly be doing it. So I came at it from the complete opposite direction. I didn't even know about Jacques Vallée when I started researching this. I started with structure. So the fact that control reliably comes from one level above the components. That's at every scale we can see. So from Levin's fields to your neurons, to cities, to nations. And I reasoned upward too, right? Why would it stop at nation? But from the bottom, so from the architecture. And I landed on the same thing, a control system. I think there should be a level above us. And it should be invisible by evolutionary necessity. So you have two completely different starting points. Vallée from the strange data at the top, and me from like the boring biology angle at the bottom that a few of you resonate with. but I think it's the same destination. And this is where they fuse. What if the phenomenon Vallée spent his life documenting is not the control system itself, but the visible edge of it, like the leakage? It's the few effects large enough or strange enough to break through into our perception. It's like the way a fever is not the infection, right? It's the part of the infection big enough for us to feel. Vallée saw the fever. He just didn't have the germ theory yet. He couldn't name the mechanism because the mechanism wasn't in UFO research at all. I think it's actually in developmental biology. I think it's in scaling laws, in the architecture of life itself, which has never once, at any level we've checked, failed to put a controlling layer above its parts. If you don't have a control layer, you get cancer. So this would mean that the phenomenon isn't aliens breaking the rules of nature. I think it may actually be nature continuing. We're seeing leakage of nature. It's the same nested control we already see running your cells, your body, your city, your nation, simply running at the next level up. It's at a scale we were never built to see. But I'm not here to tell you what to believe, right? This is a hypothesis. It is not proof. The leap from scaling laws suggests a level above us to, and that's what the phenomenon is a real leap. Okay, and I'm not going to pretend that it isn't. Vallée himself would probably push back on me. He spent his whole life refusing to name the controller, and here I am trying to name it. But as Hal Puthoff said, we need to consider all possibilities. And to me, this feels correct, right? I think Vallée was looking at something real. I think we can agree, if you're watching this channel, that the phenomenon is real. There is something there. But everyone's afraid to ask because we don't have a mechanism, right, for what is the phenomenon. I believe it could be a control system from a different level of reality. Where does it come from? Higher dimensions or even parallel dimensions, right, at our same level. Why is it here? Because we are a part of the system. The control system is a two-way street. Why can't we see it? Why don't we understand it? Because we have been evolutionarily designed to not see it. Control systems don't work if you can see them clearly. And I think we have a great example of microscopic life in the past. It's the same thing. For 2,000 years, we attributed effects from other dimensions to supernatural things that we didn't understand. Turns out they were natural. Turns out a fever is from a natural response, actually. It's not supernatural. It's pretty amazing that it comes from a completely different dimension of size and scale. What I argue is the thing we can't see now, the crazy effects from the phenomenon, may not be supernatural, could be coming from a scale different. I argue larger than us. And the phenomenon has every reason in the world to still stay invisible. If this theory resonates with you, then please consider my book, Our Fractal Universe. Pre-orders and reviews are huge, and I'd really appreciate the support. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.